The icy chill of Christmas Eve settled over the small town, blanketing every street, house, and tree in layers of snow. Alex Cooper clutched an empty leash in his gloved hands, his breath visible in short, frustrated puffs as he walked briskly down the quiet neighborhood streets. Max, his loyal golden retriever, had slipped away earlier that morning during a rare moment when Alex wasn't paying attention. Alex had searched everywhere, parks, alleys, even the trail behind his house. But there was no sign of Max. His stomach twisted with worry. Max wasn't just a pet. He was family, the one companion who had been there through all of Alex's recent struggles. The streets were nearly deserted as the last rays of daylight gave way to the glow of Christmas lights strung along rooftops and fences. Families were inside, warm and safe, sharing meals and exchanging laughter while Alex remained out in the cold, determined not to give up. His boots crunched against the frozen ground as he crossed yet another intersection. And then, just as he turned onto an unfamiliar street, he stopped in his tracks. There, sitting on the front porch of a house decked out with blinking holiday lights, was Max. The dog wagged his tail happily, as if the day's events had been an ordinary adventure. Relief washed over Alex as he approached the house. But the relief was short-lived when he realized where Max had led him. His steps faltered. He hadn't been down this street in years, and he had certainly never intended to visit this particular house again. Yet there it was, unchanged and instantly recognizable. The house belonged to Sam, his older brother. For a moment, Alex debated turning back. He could just call for Max and leave before Sam even knew he was there. But Max, ever stubborn, had no intention of moving. Instead, the dog barked and wagged his tail, looking back at the door expectantly. Alex groaned inwardly, his pride and anger battling against the need to retrieve his dog. Finally, with a reluctant sigh, he stepped onto the porch and rang the doorbell. The sound echoed inside, and Alex waited, shifting uncomfortably on his feet. He heard the faint shuffle of footsteps before the door opened, revealing a face he hadn't seen in over 5 years. Sam stood there, looking as surprised as Alex felt awkward. He was dressed casually in a sweater and jeans, his dark hair slightly mussed as though he'd been relaxing before Alex interrupted. "Alex?" Sam's voice carried a mix of disbelief and caution. "Sam?" Alex replied stiffly, avoiding his brother's eyes. "Max is here. He ran off this morning, and I've been looking for him all day." Sam glanced down at the dog, who now sat contentedly at his feet, his tail thumping against the wooden porch. A faint smile flickered across Sam's face before he stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in," he said, though his tone was far from warm. Alex hesitated. Every instinct told him to take Max and leave, to avoid opening the door to the past. But the biting wind behind him and Max's insistence on staying left him with little choice. Muttering a quiet thanks, he stepped inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, and the soft sound of Christmas music played from a speaker in the corner. It was warm, cozy even, a stark contrast to the cold tension that immediately settled between the two brothers. Alex's eyes scanned the room, noticing little touches that reminded him of their childhood. A collection of family photos on the mantel, a well-worn Christmas stocking hanging by the fireplace, and a wooden star perched at the top of the tree, identical to the one their mother had used. Sam closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "So, Max just showed up here?" "Yeah," Alex replied shortly. He crouched down to ruffle Max's fur, using the action as an excuse to avoid further eye contact. "I guess he remembered where you live." "I didn't." Sam's expression darkened slightly, but he didn't take the bait. Instead, he shrugged. He seemed comfortable enough. "Been lying by the fire all afternoon." Alex straightened and clipped the leash back onto Max's collar. "Well, thanks for looking after him. We'll get out of your way now." Sam frowned. "It's getting dark. The roads are icy. Maybe you should stay until the storm passes." Alex opened his mouth to refuse, but the thought of navigating the treacherous roads in the dark made him pause. Max, as if sensing his hesitation, gave him a hopeful look. Alex sighed. "Fine," he muttered, his tone begrudging. Sam nodded and gestured toward the living room. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll get something warm to drink. Alex sat stiffly on the couch, his gaze fixed on Max, who had already claimed a spot near the fireplace. The room was eerily quiet, save for the occasional crackle of the fire. Memories flooded Alex's mind as he glanced around. Christmas mornings spent opening gifts, their parents laughing together in this very room. But those memories were tinged with the bitterness of how everything had fallen apart. The arguments after their parents' passing, the divide over what to do with the family home, the harsh words that had driven them apart. Sam returned with 2 mugs of coffee, setting one on the table in front of Alex before sitting in the armchair across from him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The weight of their unresolved past hung heavily in the air. "So," Sam said finally, his voice breaking the silence. "How have you been?" The question was simple, but its implications were anything but. Alex hesitated, unsure how to answer. "Fine," he said curtly. "Busy with work." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Still doing graphic design?" "Yeah," Alex replied. "Freelancing now." "You?" "Construction," Sam said. "Still with the same company." "Things have been steady." Another silence fell, this one even more uncomfortable. Alex sipped his coffee, his mind racing. He had so many questions, so many things he wanted to say, but the years of distance and hurt made it nearly impossible to bridge the gap. Instead, he focused on Max, who seemed blissfully unaware of the tension. The dog stretched out by the fire, his golden coat gleaming in the warm light. Watching him, Alex felt a pang of longing, not just for the dog's carefree nature, but for a time when he and Sam had been as close as brothers should be. The night stretched on, and the snow outside thickened, blanketing the world in quiet. Inside, the 2 brothers sat in uneasy truce, the warmth of the fire doing little to thaw the cold between them. But in the back of Alex's mind, a small, fragile hope began to take root. A hope that, just maybe, this unexpected reunion could be the start of something new. The storm outside had grown worse, with thick snow swirling against the windows and muffling the world in an eerie silence. Inside Sam's house, the atmosphere was equally tense, though warmer. Alex sat on the couch with Max resting his head on his lap, the dog's steady breathing a rare source of calm. Across the room, Sam leaned against the kitchen counter, his mug of coffee untouched. The brothers exchanged few words, and when they did, the conversation felt like navigating a minefield. Every word carefully chosen, every glance weighted. Alex traced the rim of his mug with his finger, staring into the dark liquid as though it might offer some kind of escape. He wasn't sure why he was still there. The roads were treacherous, yes, but that wasn't the real reason. Something about being back in Sam's house, in the presence of his brother after so many years, stirred a mix of emotions he couldn't untangle. Resentment, nostalgia, and a flicker of something else he couldn't quite name. "Do you want something to eat?" Sam asked abruptly, breaking the silence. His tone was neutral, cautious. Alex looked up, startled by the offer. "I'm fine." Sam hesitated, as if debating whether to push further. He finally shrugged and turned toward the fridge. "I was planning to heat up some leftovers anyway. Figured you might want something." Without waiting for an answer, Sam pulled out a dish and began reheating it. The clatter of plates and the hum of the microwave filled the silence, but it didn't lessen the tension. Alex glanced at Max, who had now curled up on the rug near the fireplace, his tail wagging faintly in his sleep. The dog seemed completely at ease, as though he belonged there. The thought stirred something bittersweet in Alex. Max had always been good at finding comfort, even in places that felt foreign or uncomfortable to Alex. Sam returned a few minutes later with 2 plates of pasta and set one down in front of Alex. The sight of the food made Alex realize just how hungry he was, and he muttered a quiet thanks before taking a bite. The meal was simple, but it brought a surprising sense of warmth. For a few minutes, the 2 ate in silence, the storm outside their only companion. "So," Sam said eventually, setting his fork down, "are you staying in town for long, or just passing through?" Alex swallowed his mouthful of pasta, carefully considering his answer. "I'm here for a couple of weeks. I usually spend Christmas on my own, but I thought a change of scenery might be good." Sam's eyebrows lifted slightly. "On your own?" "Yeah." Alex took another bite, hoping to avoid elaborating. But Sam's curious expression lingered, and Alex sighed. It's just easier that way. Sam nodded slowly, but the look in his eyes suggested he didn't entirely buy the explanation. You could have called, even before all this with Mac. Alex stiffened. It's not that simple. Why not? Sam pressed, his voice calm but firm. Alex set his plate down, his appetite suddenly gone. Because we haven't spoken in years, Sam. You think I can just pick up the phone and pretend like everything's fine? I didn't say that, Sam said evenly. But you didn't have to cut me out completely either. The words hung in the air, sharp and accusing. Alex clenched his jaw, trying to suppress the anger bubbling up inside him. You think I wanted this? You think I enjoyed losing my brother? Sam leaned back, crossing his arms. You had a funny way of showing it. Alex shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're the one who wanted to sell the house, Sam. You didn't care about what it meant to me, to us, to Mom and Dad. You just wanted to move on, like none of it mattered. Sam stood too, his expression hardening. It wasn't about moving on. It was about surviving. I was drowning in debt, Alex. I didn't have the luxury of holding on to sentimental things, and you didn't think to tell me that? Alex's voice rose, the frustration spilling over. You just made the decision without me, like I didn't matter. Sam opened his mouth to respond but then stopped, his shoulders slumping slightly. He looked away, his gaze falling on Max, who had stirred awake and was now watching the argument with wide, curious eyes. I didn't know how to explain it, Sam said quietly after a long pause. I was embarrassed, ashamed, even. I thought I could handle it on my own, and I thought you'd understand. Alex stared at him, the fight draining out of him as quickly as it had flared. Sam's voice carried an unfamiliar vulnerability, one that made Alex feel both guilty and confused. For years, he had painted Sam as the villain in their story, the one who had betrayed their family's legacy. But hearing Sam's side now, Alex realized there were pieces of the puzzle he had never bothered to consider. You should have told me, Alex said finally, his tone softer but still firm. I could have helped. Sam nodded, his jaw tightening. Maybe, but we can't go back and change it now. Alex sank back onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. No, we can't. For a while, neither of them spoke. The weight of the past lingered between them, but it felt less oppressive now, as though the act of voicing their pain had lifted some of the burden. Max, sensing the shift in mood, patted over to Alex and rested his head on his lap again. Alex scratched behind his ears absent-mindedly, his thoughts racing. Alex said after a long silence, Max probably brought me here for a reason. He's always been better at fixing things than I am. Sam chuckled softly, the sound surprising both of them. He's a good dog. Yeah, Alex agreed. He is. The storm outside began to ease, the howling winds quieting to a soft whisper. Inside, the fire crackled steadily, casting a warm glow over the room. Alex glanced at Sam, and for the first time in years, he saw not just his brother, but the person who had once been his closest friend. The realization was bittersweet, but it carried a glimmer of hope. We've got a lot to figure out, Alex said, his voice hesitant. Sam nodded. Yeah, but maybe this is a start. Alex managed a small smile, one that Sam returned. It wasn't a resolution, not yet, but it was something. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The next morning, Alex woke up to the faint sound of Max barking outside. The soft glow of sunlight filtered through the curtains, reflecting off the snow that had blanketed the world overnight. For a moment, Alex didn't know where he was. The unfamiliar ceiling, the faint scent of pine, and the warmth of the blankets threw him off until the events of the previous evening came rushing back. He was at Sam's house, and for the first time in years, they had managed to talk without shouting. That alone felt surreal. Pulling himself out of bed, Alex stretched and made his way to the window. Outside, he saw Max bounding through the snow, his golden fur glistening in the morning light as he chased a stick. Sam was standing a few feet away, bundled in a heavy coat and hat, tossing the stick again. The sight was almost too normal, too peaceful, as though the years of estrangement between the two brothers had been nothing more than a bad dream. Alex got dressed and headed downstairs. The smell of coffee greeted him, rich and inviting, and he found a pot already brewed in the kitchen. Pouring himself a mug, he watched Sam and Max through the window for a moment longer before stepping outside. The cold hit him instantly, sharp and invigorating, but it didn't bother him as much as he thought it would. Sam turned as Alex approached, offering a nod of acknowledgement. Max, of course, ran straight to Alex, dropping the stick at his feet and wagging his tail expectantly. "Good morning," Sam said, his voice carrying the faintest hint of warmth. "Morning," Alex replied. He picked up the stick and tossed it across the yard, watching as Max darted after it with unbridled enthusiasm. "Looks like he's enjoying himself. He's been out here for almost an hour," Sam said. "Seems like he needed to burn off some energy." Alex chuckled softly, tucking his hands into his jacket pockets. The two stood in silence for a while, watching Max play. The quiet was comfortable, almost companionable, and Alex felt the tension in his chest start to ease. He glanced at Sam, who looked different in the soft morning light. Older, maybe, or just more human. The sharp edges of anger and resentment that had defined Alex's memories of him seemed to have softened, and Alex couldn't help but wonder how much he himself had changed in Sam's eyes. "I was thinking," Sam said suddenly, breaking the silence, "there's a tree lot a couple of blocks from here. They always have the best ones. I haven't picked one out yet this year." Alex raised an eyebrow. "You don't already have a tree? What's that thing in the living room?" "A fake one," Sam admitted with a sheepish shrug. "I keep it around for convenience, but it's not the same. Figured I'd get a real one this year. Thought maybe you'd want to come along." The suggestion took Alex by surprise. It was such a simple thing, picking out a Christmas tree, but it carried an unspoken weight. It was an invitation, a chance to share something ordinary, something almost normal. For a moment, Alex hesitated. Part of him wanted to decline, to retreat back into the safety of his usual solitude. But another part of him, quieter but insistent, urged him to say yes. "Sure," Alex said finally. "Why not?" A flicker of relief crossed Sam's face, though he quickly masked it with a nod. "Great. Let me grab my keys." The drive to the tree lot was short but pleasant. They talked about small things, the weather, Max's antics, the state of the roads. The conversation was light, almost tentative, as though they were testing the waters of their newfound truce. When they arrived, the smell of fresh pine filled the air, and Alex couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia. It had been years since he'd done this, not since before their parents passed. Sam led the way through the rows of trees, pausing occasionally to inspect one or another. Alex followed, his hands tucked into his pockets as he took in the scene. Families wandered through the lot, children laughing and shouting as they pointed out their favorite trees. The air buzzed with an energy that was both chaotic and comforting. "This one looks good," Sam said, stopping in front of a tall, full tree with vibrant green branches. Alex nodded. "It's nice. Classic." Sam tilted his head, considering it for a moment before moving on. "Maybe a little too big for my place." They continued like that for a while, inspecting tree after tree, each one sparking a brief discussion. Alex found himself enjoying it more than he expected. There was something grounding about the process, something that reminded him of better times. And the more he and Sam talked, the more the walls between them seemed to crumble. Eventually, they settled on a tree that was just the right size, tall and symmetrical, with a fresh, earthy smell that immediately brought back memories of childhood. Sam paid for it, and the two of them loaded it into the truck, tying it down securely before heading back to the house. Once they were home, the real work began. They cleared a space in the living room and set the tree up in its stand, adjusting it until it was perfectly straight. Then they brought out the decorations, a mix of old and new. Some of the ornaments were clearly from their childhood, faded and worn, but still beautiful in their own way. Others were newer, simpler, but they added a nice balance. As they worked, Alex felt something shift. The act of decorating the tree, of working together toward a shared goal, felt oddly healing. They talked and laughed, sharing stories about the ornaments and their memories of past Christmases. It was the kind of connection Alex had thought he'd lost forever. When the tree was finally done, they stepped back to admire their work. The lights twinkled softly, casting a warm glow over the room and the star on top, one of the few things they'd managed to salvage from their parents' house, shone brightly. For the first time in years, the house felt like a home. "Looks good," Sam said, his voice quiet but sincere. "Yeah," Alex agreed. "It does." They stood there for a while, neither of them speaking, just taking in the moment. Max lay curled up near the tree, his tail wagging faintly in his sleep. The storm from the previous night had left behind a world of pristine snow, and through the window, they could see the soft glow of Christmas lights from the neighboring houses. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't the kind of resolution Alex had imagined when he thought about what it would take to mend things with Sam. But it was a start, and for now, that was enough. That evening, the house felt different. The glow from the newly decorated tree filled the living room with a soft, comforting light. The air smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon, blending with the warmth of the fireplace where Max lay sprawled, his nose twitching in his sleep. Alex sat on the couch, a mug of hot chocolate warming his hands, while Sam flipped through an old photo album he'd retrieved from a box in the attic. They hadn't talked much since finishing the tree. Words didn't seem necessary, and the silence between them no longer carried the weight of unresolved anger. Instead, it was the kind of quiet shared between two people who were learning to be comfortable in each other's presence again. "Do you remember this?" Sam asked, holding up a page from the album. The photo showed the two of them as kids, bundled in oversized coats and scarves, standing next to their parents in front of a Christmas tree farm. Alex recognized the crooked grin on his younger self's face, the way he held onto their mother's hand as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah," Alex said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That was the year Max came into the picture. Mom and Dad swore we weren't getting a dog, and then they brought him home like it was the most normal thing." Sam laughed softly, the sound rich with nostalgia. "Dad tried to act like it was all Mom's idea, but you could tell he'd been planning it for weeks. He had that guilty look every time we walked past the pet store." Alex chuckled, the memory bringing a warmth that spread beyond the hot chocolate in his hands. It had been years since he'd thought about that Christmas, about the joy and chaos Max had brought into their lives. The dog had been a constant ever since, weathering every storm with an unwavering loyalty that Alex couldn't imagine living without. "He's the only thing that stayed the same," Alex said quietly, looking down at Max. "Everything else feels like it's changed." Sam didn't respond right away, flipping to the next page in the album. The photos here were more recent, though not by much. Birthdays, graduations, family gatherings. Each one captured a moment frozen in time, a moment that now felt impossibly distant. "Things do change," Sam said finally, his voice soft but steady. "But some things don't." "Not completely." Alex glanced at him, unsure what to say. Sam's words felt like an olive branch, a tentative offering of understanding, and Alex wasn't sure if he deserved it. For years, he'd clung to his anger, his sense of betrayal, as though it were the only thing keeping him grounded. Letting it go felt terrifying, like stepping into uncharted territory. "I wasn't fair to you," Alex said after a long pause. The words came out rough, as though they'd been lodged in his throat for years. "I didn't try to understand what you were going through. I just assumed you didn't care." Sam looked up, surprise flickering across his face before it softened into something else. "I didn't make it easy for you to understand," he admitted. "I should have been honest about what I was dealing with. I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was push you away." They fell silent again, the weight of their shared regret filling the room. Max stirred, letting out a contented sigh as he shifted closer to the fire. Alex reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears, finding comfort in the familiar gesture. "It doesn't have to stay like this," Alex said finally. "We've got a lot to work through, but maybe we can figure it out." Sam nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I'd like that." For the first time in years, Alex felt a spark of hope. Small, fragile, but undeniably real. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he didn't want to carry the burden of their estrangement any longer. There was too much history, too much love buried beneath the pain. to let it all go to waste. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of quiet conversation and shared memories. They flipped through more photo albums, recounting stories that made them laugh and wince in equal measure. Sam brought out an old board game they hadn't played since they were kids, and for a while, it felt like nothing had changed. The walls they'd built between them were still there, but cracks were beginning to show. As the night wore on, the fire dwindled to embers, and the weight of the day began to settle in. Alex stretched and yawned, glancing at the clock on the mantel. It was nearly midnight. "I should head to bed," he said, setting his empty mug on the coffee table. Sam nodded, though there was a trace of hesitation in his eyes. "Yeah, me too." Alex made his way upstairs, Max padding behind him with his tail wagging lazily. The guest room was cozy, with soft sheets and a warm quilt that smelled faintly of lavender. Alex climbed into bed, his body heavy with exhaustion, but his mind was lighter than it had been in years. The next morning, Alex woke to the sound of laughter. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming, but as he blinked awake, he realized the sound was real. Pulling on a sweater, he made his way downstairs to find Sam in the kitchen, talking to a woman Alex didn't recognize. She was holding a tray of cookies, her cheeks flushed from the cold, and she had the kind of easy smile that made Alex instantly like her. "This is Jenna," Sam said when he noticed Alex standing in the doorway. "She lives next door. She drops off cookies every year." Jenna waved, her smile widening. "Nice to meet you. Sam's told me a little about you." "Not too much, I hope," Alex said, his tone light. The warmth of the kitchen, combined with Jenna's cheerful presence, made him feel more at ease than he expected. They chatted for a while, sharing stories and jokes as they munched on the cookies. Jenna stayed for breakfast, and by the time she left, Alex found himself smiling in a way he hadn't in years. The weight of the past still lingered, but it felt lighter now, less oppressive. As he helped Sam clear the table, Alex glanced out the window. The snow had stopped, leaving the world covered in a pristine, glittering blanket. The sight was breathtaking, and for the first time in years, Alex felt something close to peace. "Maybe we should take Max for a walk," Sam suggested, following Alex's gaze. "It's a perfect day for it." Alex nodded. "Yeah, I think that's a good idea." They bundled up and headed outside, Max bounding ahead of them with boundless energy. The air was crisp and cold, but it carried a sense of renewal, of possibilities yet to come. As they walked, Alex found himself looking forward to the days ahead, to the work of rebuilding what they'd lost. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he believed it was possible, and that, he realized, was the best gift he could have asked for. Thank you very much for watching the video to the end. If you were moved by the story of the canine hero and the spirit of Christmas that transformed lives, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments what you thought of this exciting journey.